Welcome, welcome, welcome again to the leading podcast on the subject of the American system of political economy. This is episode 10 of a series that started about 10 months ago, where the world's leading authority on the American system of political economy, the man himself, Neil Martin, continues to introduce us to this long, unfortunately, hidden gems of American history that most of us in our adult lives have been denied access to. Well, Neil has done the work. He knows all of them. He's made friends with all of them, and he's introducing them to us one after another. So today, Robert Ellis Thompson. Political fighting is for the continuation of man as the immortal species. Thompson is an Irish American, was a student of Henry Carey. Thompson gave a tribute for the centenary birth of Henry C. Carey. Thompson has three writings, on political economy. Today, Neil will be looking at Thompson's Elements of Political Economy. This book on political economy is a book that does a lot of political fighting. And all American system books or protectionist books should do political fighting. British free trade books do not do political fighting. They believe in disorganizing mankind. The main aim of political fighting is to crush the oligarchy. It is not to save the planet. It is not to save animals. It is not for reproductive rights. It is not to defend sex workers. It is not to legalize drugs. Political fighting is not for mundane single issues. It is not to finance genocide. Political fighting its aim is to perpetuate man as the immortal species. Thompson showed how he revered Henry Carey in the centenary birth of Henry Carey. He also showed his reverence to Henry Carey when he spoke about association in his book, Elements of Political Economy. Very important. Political economic books, the good ones, engage in political fighting to perpetuate man as the immortal species. And Robert Ellis Thompson did just that. Political economy books also tell you what side of humanity one is on. Throughout this presentation, you will see what side Thompson is on. Thompson will tell us about the main fault in the wealth of nations, Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations. It will tell us how animals are incapable of association. He will tell us what protection does. He will speak a few powerful words about Hamilton's report on the subject of manufacturers. He provides us with economic intelligence of the British. No political economy book is complete without an attack or economic intel on the British. And Robert Ellis Thompson does his job. Lastly, we will see Thompson's banking philosophy as something which the British system of political economy is not creative enough to replicate. So enough about me. We are starting this a little late. I'm going to turn it over to the man himself to introduce you to somebody that you should have known, but now you're getting to know, Robert Ellis Thompson. Neil, it's all yours.
Okay, so this presentation is going to be about Robert Ellis Thompson. The title of the presentation is Robert Ellis Thompson, Political Fighting is for the Continuation of Man as the Immortal Species, a student of Henry Carey. Now, throughout this presentation, I'm going to be explaining to you and showing to you on how Robert Ellis Thompson is a student of Henry C. Carey. Next slide, Victor. And this is the book. Elements of Political Economy with special reference to the industrial history of nations. Robert Ellis Thompson, Philadelphia, Porter and Coates, 1875. This is one of the best books written in the 1870s, by the way. Next slide, Victor. To Adam Smith, national sovereignty does not exist. Adam Smith is known as the father of political economy. He's known as the god of free trade. But protectionists and the American system of political economy attack Adam Smith, and they are valid in attacking Adam Smith. So here we have Robert Ellis Thompson pointing out the chief flaw in Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations, right? So Robert Ellis Thompson says, the chief fault in the book is its failure to fulfill the promise of the title, promising to discuss the wealth of nations, quote unquote. It practically ignores their existence and treats the whole question as if there were no such bodies. Smith writes as if the world were all under one government, with no boundary lines to restrain the movement of labor and capital, no inequalities of national civilization and industrial status to affect the competition of producer with producer. He ignores, therefore, many of the most important elements of the problem that he undertook to solve. Okay, so Adam Smith, according to Robert Ellis Thompson is on point. Adam Smith does not discuss the wealth of nations. He discusses the wealth, he discusses how to get private wealth and how to organize a world economy where there's no sovereign nation states. Now, we have a whole lot of people who want private wealth, right? If we take a look at the jabronis or evil men who want private wealth, Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, Elon Musk. Elon Musk backs genocide in Palestine. He doesn't believe in thermonuclear power. He has a backward space program. Bill Gates believes in population control. He thinks the world is overpopulated. Warren Buffett is pretty much like that. Private wealth, right? Can private wealth actually lead to national wealth? No, it can't. Let's take a look at this, right? So if people are going to say that private wealth is good for a nation, okay, does private wealth increase the potential relative population density? Let's take a look at things that have stimulated private wealth, like the stock market. Does the stock market increase the potential relative population density? What's the potential relative population density, right? You have a square mile. You introduce loads of technology, or the present technology there, or future technology, and you can determine what's going to be the potential relative population density, right? I'm sorry. Doing research and development in pot is not going to increase the potential relative population density, right? The stock market is not going to do that. Currency speculation is not going to do that. For Adam Smith to say that there's no difference between private wealth and national wealth, think about that real quick. Adam Smith is saying there is no difference between private wealth and national wealth. There's a difference between sovereignty and not being and being a dependent nation. If your nation is dependent on foreign trade, it's different from a nation that has a vast domestic commerce and they're independent economic wise. So what we see here with what Robert Ellis Thompson is doing and saying, he is saying that the British system, Adam Smith's wealth of nations, does not create national wealth. What creates private wealth? Things that don't add on to the prosperity of nations. Victor, can you go to the next slide? Okay, this is Lyndon LaRouche's triple curve, right? Buying in the cheapest market. Where did buying in the cheapest market land the United States of America and Europe? Physical economic input and output declining drastically. Financial aggregates going up. Speculation into the markets. Monetary aggregates going up. In the latter years, the monetary aggregates surpass the financial aggregates, causing hyperinflation and more inflation. This is not a creative economy. This is not an economy that's raising its potential relative population density. This is an economy that is not stimulating national wealth. It is an economy stimulating private wealth. Next slide show, please, Victor. Next slide, Victor. What association and individuality isn't. Man is not a beast. Okay, this is one of my favorite quotes in Elements of Political Economy by Robert Ellis Thompson. Robert Ellis Thompson is going to detail to us on why animals are not human beings and on why you need to have a diversity of employments to actually show that there is an association. You have to actually have an association to have an organized economy. And animals will never have an organized economy. People who go to Taylor Swift concerts will never understand an organized economy. Okay, this is Robert Ellis Thompson. The individuality of the parts of an organism, think nation, has its end in their interdependence and mutual helpfulness. A flock of animals, though a collection of individuals, is not a whole made up of differentiated parts. It is only a numerical extension of a single specimen, a mob of men. A mob of men is equally deficient in true organic unity. It is united only by the existence of the same overmastering rage of lawlessness in each single individual as animates the entire mob. The state is a body in which men have different functions as different personalities, in which each has its place of service to the whole body. The greater and more marked the variety of the parts, the more closely the whole body is bound in an effective unity. The nation takes a low rank industrially whose members are not employed chiefly in serving one another, but in serving the members of other nationalities. Now let's take a look at where Robert Ellis Thompson is saying a flock of animals, though a collection of individuals, is not a whole made up of differentiated parts. Robert Ellis Thompson is saying a flock of animals don't have various parts. They are not human beings. They are not lords of creation. They cannot create a diversity of employment. They cannot have association. What's association? Commerce. We don't see animals having an organized economy. They don't have any type of economy. Human beings have an economy, right? Let's take a look at the first sentence. The individuality of parts of an organism, think nation, has at its end their interdependence and mutual helpfulness. A sovereign nation state wants to be interdependent on that nation, on the nation itself. A sovereign, independent nation doesn't want to be dependent on foreign nations for a variety of commodities and of technology. We don't want that, right? We want to have an agro-industrial economy. Every nation should have an agro-industrial economy. We don't want cash crop economies. We don't want the David Ricardo principle of comparative advantage. What does comparative advantage create? Look at the last sentence. The nation takes a low rank industrially, whose members are not employed chiefly in serving one another, but in serving the members of other nationalities. This is what free trade wants to do. Free trade doesn't want to grow domestic commerce. It wants to grow foreign commerce. And when you grow foreign commerce, you are not a unity. You are not a nation state. Take a look at something else. Robert Ellis Thompson says, a state is a body in which men have different functions as well as different personalities, in which each has its place of service to the whole body. They service the whole body. What's the whole body? The organism, the nation state. The principle of nation state is in man. The principle of nation state is not in a slave of nature, right? So when I say what association and individuality isn't, man is not a beast, I am saying that man is the most highest organized form of life on the earth. And because we are the most highest organized form of life on earth, we must have an awesome fate. I'm sorry, I don't consider having an awesome fate having countries being the workshop of the world and servicing Europe and the United States of America. I really don't see Africa having a future if she wants to service Europe and America for manufactured goods and cheap labor goods. That's not going to develop Africa, right? What's going to develop Africa is if the population in Africa know that association and individuality, if you aim for that, you are saying man is not a beast. Next slide, Victor. All right, this is Carey's economic diagram. So Robert Ellis Thompson is going to be talking about something about how to organize an economy. And while he's talking about this, when he spoke about this, I saw Henry Carey's economic diagram, and Robert Ellis Thompson makes it known that he's talking about Henry Carey's economic diagram. Okay, at the foot of the Rocky Mountains, rags would be as good as worthless, while paper will bring a far higher price than in the East. Just such is the relation of the price of raw materials of all sorts as compared with the price of manufactured goods of all sorts. The points where the lines of price almost converge are those at which the one is transformed into the other by manufacture. Free trade would not completely, but in great measure, transfer those points to the other side of the ocean. Would the producer of food and raw materials be benefited by the transfer? He will have to pay the heaviest tax upon industry, the cost of transportation in each direction. He would spend 2 bushels of corn in getting one to the market, and then pay an equal measure for everything that he needed to bring back for his own use. Victor, go to the next slide real quick. Okay, this is Henry Carey's economic diagram. Look at the Rocky Mountains. Robert Ellis Thompson mentions the Rocky Mountains. Look at rags and paper. Robert Ellis Thompson mentions rags and paper. Look to the east. You see Massachusetts, right? Robert Ellis Thompson is saying paper is more expensive in the West than in the East. But rags and paper, their prices gradually approximate when you head towards the East. This is Henry Carey's economic diagram. Now, to the far right of the economic diagram, you have domestic commerce. If you have domestic commerce, you have association and individuality. What we just discussed on a previous slide, right? So we have an organized economy. That organized economy is manifesting domestic commerce. Go back to the previous slide, Victor. Okay, so we have this domestic commerce. And Robert Ellis Thompson is saying, what happens if the producer and the farmer were separated and they were put at a great distance, which free trade likes to do? Free trade likes having a workshop across the ocean and having agriculture on the other side of the ocean, right? What is that going to do? That's going to cripple and destroy manufacturers, home manufacturers. It's going to destroy domestic commerce. It's going to make transportation of goods a whole lot expensive. What Henry Carey calls the tax of transportation, right? This shows you on how Robert Ellis Thompson is a student of Henry Carey, right? But not only that, Robert Ellis Thompson is saying he would have to pay the heaviest tax upon industry, the cost of transportation in each direction. Now, I already touched upon that, right? So when you have the consumer and the producer at a far distance, the producer has to pay a great deal of money to get the goods transported, or the farmer. Do we really want that type of economy where there's a massive tax on transportation? That what the massive tax on transportation is showing is that there's no domestic commerce. There's a big unorganized foreign trade, and that's killing civilization. Next slide, Victor. Next slide, the one on Hamilton. On His Excellency Alexander Hamilton. If you're writing a book on political economy, one of the things that you have to do, you should talk about Alexander Hamilton. If you're not talking about Alexander Hamilton in a political economy book, something is wrong, or you better be attacking the hell out of the British, and it better be original, right? Okay, so Robert Ellis Thompson is speaking about His Excellency Alexander Hamilton on his report on the subject of manufacturers, one of my favorite reads in political economy. And here we go. A second and much more protective tariff was adopted August 1790, after Secretary Hamilton had been asked to report a plan conformably to the recommendation of the President for the encouragement and promotion of manufacturers. At the next section, October 1791, Hamilton made his famous Treasury report. On the subject, it was a masterly statement of the new era upon which industry was entering, through the use of machinery and the division of labor, of all the advantages that would be lost to the nation who fell behind in this advance, of the interdependence of all the material interests of the country, and of the relation of a diversified industry to national prosperity. He stated with candor and refuted with force the usual objections to a protective policy. Okay, so Robert Ellis Thompson says this report on manufacturing is a masterly statement. How is it such a masterly of statement? Alexander Hamilton is talking about we're going to bring machinery and increase the division of labor into the economy. Stop right there. Okay, so how are you going to create more machinery, build more machinery, and increase the division of labor, and also increase the diversity of employment? By introducing manufacturing, by having an agro-industrial sector, right? In Alexander Hamilton's report on manufacturing, he says, hence, the produce of the labor of the two farmers would not be greater the produce of the labor of the farmer and the artificer, thus enables the farmer to enlarge his stock of agricultural industry, right? So what Alexander Hamilton is saying, two farmers versus a farmer and an artisan, the artisan and the farmer has a diversity of employment. They have an agro-industrial economy. The two farmers have an agricultural economy. There's a difference between an agricultural economy and an agro-industrial economy, right? Just think of it this way, right? In the report on manufacturing, Hamilton says, he's talking about banking. This is one of my favorite subjects in protectionism and in the American system of political economy, when someone talks about banking, right? So Hamilton says, the introduction of banks has been shown on another occasion has a powerful tendency to extend the active capital of a country. So how are we going to extend the active capital of a country? By introducing banks, right? And the banks, how are the banks going to be doing business? Are banks going to be prosperous in only agricultural areas? Or are banks going to be prosperous in agro-industrial areas? Banks are going to be prosperous in agro-industrial areas, right? So this is the genius of Alexander Hamilton, right? But we have to go on even more. Let's see where we're at. Okay, I gotta make this quick. Okay, so the nations that didn't go along with Alexander Hamilton's report on manufacturing, or who were unable to have an agro-industrial economy, three nations come into mind: Portugal, Ireland, and India, and sometimes the United States of America. India got genocide by the British. Ireland got genocide by the British, right? They destroyed Ireland with the Act of Union. They destroyed India with colonialism. They destroyed India's domestic commerce, right? If you destroy domestic commerce, the people have to fall back onto agriculture. That's the same thing the Irish and the Indians had to do. Portugal, the British destroyed Portugal with the Muthian Treaty in 1703, where Portugal sold wines to the British at a cheaper duty and allowed for the British to flood the Portuguese markets and their colonial markets with British manufactured goods, right? That destroyed the economy of Portugal. If they would have, if they had the vision of Alexander Hamilton, that wouldn't have happened, right? Could you have imagined if the British implemented the report on the subject of manufacturing in India? They would have never had genocide, which the British did, and the British don't like talking about it, right? Okay, So we discussed the report on manufacturing, and I introduced banking, right? Here's something else. Here's another quote by Hamilton. Hamilton says, the aid of foreign capital may safely and with considerable latitude be taken into calculation. Its instrumentality has been long experienced in our external commerce, and it has begun to be felt in various other modes. Not only our funds, but our agriculture and our internal improvements have been animated by it. It has already, in a few instances, extended even to our manufacturers. This is in the report on the subject of manufacturing. Alexander Hamilton is stating we can use foreign investment to increase our agriculture, build internal improvements, and build manufacturing. Who thinks about such revolutionary ideas like this? No one does. This is why Robert Ellis Thompson said this was a mastery of statecraft. Okay, Victor, we can take a break.
I think we probably
Bye,
should just
Victor.
keep. I think we probably should just keep going because
Okay, yeah, let's keep going. Yeah,
it's 7:48, and I
yeah,
think
let's keep
we still have
going.
4 more slides. All
Yeah,
right,
let's keep going.
it's all
Yeah.
you. Next slide.
All right. Next slide. Now, as Victor spoke about in the introduction, Robert Ellis Thompson gives you economic intel on the British. Fantastic economic intel on the British. We don't want to hear this thing that protectionism doesn't scare the British. We don't want to hear this thing that protectionism is just 19th century political economy or 19th century economics. Look what the British London Economist, the flagship free trade magazine still today, is saying about free trade and protection. And Robert Ellis Thompson is bringing this up. No continental people has followed English example. There is no doubt, said the London Economist, that free trade is one of the most unpopular things in practice in the world. It has not enabled England to hold the position of industrial superiority that she once did. We have now, says a free trade authority, many rivals, where 30 or 40 years ago we had none. We formerly supplied nations which now partially or entirely manufacture for themselves. We formerly had the monopoly of many markets, where we are now met and undersold by young competitors. To several quarters, we now send only their portion of the whole demand. Holy cow, the British are freaking out. The British are freaking out. They are saying that free trade is not so popular. They are saying that they have many rivals in markets where they were the only where they were the only supplier. Now, this is coming from Robert Ellis Thompson. Robert Ellis Thompson is a student of Henry Carey, right? So if you're a student of Henry Carey, we also say that Robert Ellis Thompson is an Irish American. He was born in Ireland and moved over to the United States, right? Okay, so Robert Ellis Thompson is taking some personal pleasure in what the London Economist is saying. They are saying that free trade is no longer popular. What do the British do when their economic systems, where their economic system is not popular? Do they throw a parade? Do they Do they embrace the change, or do they disorganize the population and have the population go to war? Look what the present the transatlantic system is. Where's the transatlantic system? The transatlantic system is growing very unpopular. The BRICS is the new paradigm. The Belt and Road Initiative, peace through development, is the official policy. The British, the London Economist, does not like that. The British wants it their way. They don't want to see a world where there's peace through development. They want free trade everywhere. And what type of free trade is this, right? This is the type of free trade that is not going to create sovereign nation states. So just pump the brakes. The London Economist, the flagship magazine for the British Empire, which loves free trade, has publicly stated that free trade is very unpopular and the British are losing their markets. The British don't care if they lose their markets. They don't want sovereign nation states, right? If there's a call to go for a community of sovereign nation states, the British will react with war. They will react with thermonuclear war. They don't care. They just don't want to see sovereign nation states. They will destroy the planet. They will destroy Earth, right? So what we have to know is that the British were freaking out in the late 19th century, and they're freaking out right now. Okay, Victor, go to the next slide. Okay. This is a good quote. Foreign trade that undermines sovereignty. We don't want the foreign trade that undermines sovereignty. You have so many third world countries saying that we want to export more and import less. We want to accumulate world reserves, as in the dollars, so we can grow rich. That's not how you develop an economy. Why would you develop an economy at the expense of other countries, where you create victims, which David H. Mason said, free trade creates victims. Free trade doesn't create winners. It creates more victims than winners, right? And why would you want to be a winner where everybody else is a victim and there's no sovereign nation states and you are at the top? Okay, this is Robert Ellis Thompson. Is it natural that any nation should keep its farms on one continent and its workshops on another? Is it natural that cotton on its way from the grower to the weaver, to the wearer, should go halfway around the globe and back again? Is it natural that a large part of the race should be employed in carrying bulky articles, raw materials, and coarse goods from some countries to others in the same climate and of the same general capacity? Is it natural that a country with millions of tons of iron on the surface of her soil and square miles of good coal not far below it, and most of her laboring to waste for lack of employment, should send for railroad iron thousands upon thousands of miles? Is it not a most unnatural and artificial system? Or is there no test? What is natural in this connection, except present cheapness and money price? Okay, so Robert Ellis Thompson, first of all, right? Cheapness is not how you determine if you're going to set up industries or whether or not you're going to have domestic commerce or not. If it's too expensive to have domestic commerce, what's too expensive? You have the iron ore in your country. You have coal in your country. You have water power in your country. You have sufficient energy in your country. You have a population that's unemployed. Why do you want free trade? You want a sovereign nation state, right? And as Robert Ellis Thompson already stated, why should we have our workshops or manufacturing plants on the other side of the ocean and agriculture on the other side of the ocean? All that is doing is facilitating foreign trade. All that is doing is making sure that there's no domestic commerce. And Robert Ellis Thompson is saying domestic commerce is natural. Foreign trade that suppresses the growth of the sovereign nation state is not natural. And the School of Free Trade says domestic commerce is growing wine in a hothouse. This is what Adam Smith said. Adam Smith said, if you want to have manufacturing plants in your country, that's like growing grapes in glass houses. No, it's not. It's about national sovereignty. And Robert Ellis Thompson wanted national sovereignty. Why should we have a situation where in the 1870s or 1860s, the United States of America wanted to build railroads? What do you need to build railroads? You need iron ore and coal to make steel. Why would you buy railroads from England? You can make them in the United States of America, and hello, you can have domestic commerce. You can have domestic commerce and a diversity of employments. But you want to buy in the cheapest market. You don't want to create national wealth. You want to create private wealth. That is insane. The type of foreign trade that free trade creates is insane, and all it does is creates losers, not winners. Okay, next slide show, Victor. Oh, go back to the previous slideshow. I forgot to say one thing. Okay, so when you have this organized trade, this irrational foreign trade, you're worshiping David Ricardo and Thomas Malthus, right? And what was one of David Ricardo's prime theories? Comparative advantage. Comparative advantage doesn't want to create sovereign nation states. It's very funny, and it's very sad that African countries who were colonized by European colonial powers went with cash crop farming, exporting raw materials, and now they want to follow the advice of other free traders and other people with foreign trade, the mercantile system, to have more exports and less imports. What about domestic commerce? What about actually creating domestic commerce? Right? So this policy of the British, where they disorganize commerce, where they create a trade that favors foreign trade and destroys domestic commerce. This is the Ricardo Malthusian policy. We have to crush it. And this is what Robert Ellis Thompson wanted to do. He told you, here is a situation where states, countries have a workshop over there and an agriculture over there, right? And they don't have domestic commerce. And he's saying we can't have that. We need an agro-industrial economy in every country. Next slide, Victor. Okay, what protection does? This is something that no free trader ever talks about. You will not find this online on Wikipedia, Investopedia, or any of these jabroni websites that say that they're they know about protection. They don't know nothing about protection. They just know definitions with no souls, right? So here's Robert Ellis Thompson. In this sense, protection is a great promoter of commerce. It creates variety of industrial function within the nation and fosters the most rapid and continual interchange of services between persons thus differentiated. It promotes association between members of the same nation by producing variety in their employments, while free trade between more or less advanced nations always resulted in the destruction of association among the people of the less advanced and in their reduction to a monotony of occupation. There is no vaster commerce in the world than that which takes place between the 50 millions of people who live inside the line drawn by the American tariff and who are growing in mutual interdependence with every year of its existence. Okay, so Robert Ellis Thompson tells us what protection does, right? He says it in the first sentence. In this sense, protection is the great promoter of commerce, right? Now, who has been saying that the reason why we want protectionism is so that we can get domestic commerce? Students of Henry Carey. When I talk to free traders and communists, I ask them, what is the purpose of protectionism? They don't know. They have never said domestic commerce. They've never said domestic commerce, right? And Robert Ellis Thompson is saying the purpose of protectionism is that it promotes commerce, right? You want to organize a trade so as you favor domestic commerce, right? But not only that, Robert Ellis Thompson is saying it promotes association between different members of the society, right? So here again, Robert Ellis Thompson is he's talking about association. This is the first time that he's mentioning association in this presentation, right? And he also says it increases the variety of employments. Okay, increase the variety of employments. The report on the subject of manufacturers by His Excellency Alexander Hamilton will do the same thing. We have already spoken about on how Alexander Hamilton said these banks that we will establish in the United States of America, they're going to help out manufacturing. Now, how would banks help out a country? Well, first of all, the banks have to know that manufacturing, agriculture, and progress should grow at should grow together, right? There's a harmony of interest, right? So the sole purpose of protectionism is to promote the harmony of interest. And who wrote The Harmony of Interest? It's a book by Henry Carey. Henry Carey wrote The Harmony of Interest. And the main purpose of protection is to create domestic commerce, right? Now, if protection wants to create domestic commerce, what does Wall Street want to create? Do we ever see people on Wall Street saying we want to create domestic commerce? Do we ever see hedge funds saying they want to create domestic commerce? Do we ever see people who are for the Great Reset say we want to create domestic commerce? No, they don't want to increase the potential relative population density. They don't want to wage political warfare against the oligarchy. Who does Wall Street serve? The oligarchy. Who do hedge funds serve? The oligarchy. Who does the Great Reset serve? The oligarchy, right? The oligarchy doesn't want to see protectionism. You either want to be a protectionist, you want to represent the American system of political economy, or you represent the oligarchy. There's no other side. It's you want the American system of political economy, or you want to be a lapdog of the British Empire, right? So as I state again, right? Hold on, we're not finished yet. Robert Ellis Thompson is saying the 50 million people in the United States of America have a vaster commerce than anywhere else on earth. The United States of America has a bigger base of consumption, 50 million people, than any country in Europe, than any country in Europe, right? Bigger than in China, bigger than in Japan, bigger than in India. But you got to remember, China was semi-colonized and India was colonized. Africa was colonized. Latin America, they had their problems, right? But the United States of America was out-competing the British in Europe in having domestic commerce, right? So what we have to walk away from this in stating that protectionism is the great promoter of commerce. If anybody speaks about protectionism and don't say that protectionism is the great promoter of commerce, you should tell them to shut up and start reading Alexander Hamilton and Henry Carey. Next slide, please, Victor. Okay, banking philosophy and theory. This is very special. This is Robert Ellis Thompson again. To establish a bank of issue in a community where none has existed before is to coin the mutual credit and confidence of the people into available money. It is to bring men into closer and more helpful association by furnishing a new supply of the instrument of association. That's beautiful. And of the exchange of services. It is to put the means of industrial activity into the hands of those captains of industry who will open avenues of useful employment to the idle and the dependent. You know, one of the things that I love so much about political economy books from the American system of political economy, the banking theory is so beautiful to read, right? We've already seen His Excellency Alexander Hamilton. Now we're seeing Robert Ellis Thompson. Robert Ellis Thompson just stated, to establish a bank of issue in a community where none has existed before is to coin the mutual credit and confidence of the people into available money. They want to make money available so that you can have an association grow and develop in that area. When do we see bankers such as Mark Carney saying, we want to establish banks, international banks, to develop third world countries? He never says that. He never says the purpose of a bank is to extend capital and to have water somehow and to have you gotta go to the last slideshow, Victor. Right? And so Mark Carney is not going to say that, well, our best loaners, our best clients who receive loans are captains of industry. The Great Reset doesn't want to help out captains of industry. They want people to be idle and dependent. They want people to care about reproduction rights, smoking marijuana, legalizing drugs, LGBT rights. That's what they want. They don't want a clientele that is the captain of industry, right? But to go even further, the captain of industry, right? Okay. All right. Robert Ellis Thompson says, the captain of industry needs the instrument of association. And what is the instrument of association? The instrument of association, a phrase coined by Henry Carey. Money is the instrument of association. Mark Carney is never going to say that. People who support the Great Reset are never going to say that. Free traders are never going to say that. So money as the great instrument of association shows you something. Who is the person that said money is the great instrument of association? How would he want an economy organized? He would want an economy organized where the banks cater towards agriculture, manufacturing, and commerce, right? What do the banks cater towards today? Green New Deal crap, windmills, solar panels, pot shops, reproduction rights, regime change in Russia, regime change in China, thermonuclear war, right? So Henry C. Carey, right, his student Robert Ellis Thompson, he tells you that I'm a student of Henry Carey. And what is the biggest way in which he says I'm a student of Henry Carey is when he says the instrument of association. Because if you read Henry Carey's Principles of Social Science, Volume 2, the last 7 chapters, the subject is money, the instrument of association. And as I stated already, if you see money as the instrument of association, you automatically see that government has to use public credit to facilitate agriculture, facilitate manufacturers, and facilitate commerce. Robert Ellis Thompson knew this. He knew this, right? So with that said, protectionism is the promoter of commerce. And if you have the thinking that money is the instrument of association, you want to implement policies and economic policy that's going to promote the harmony of interests. Robert Ellis Thompson is a student of Henry Carey. The end.